World food prices declined for a second consecutive month in October. Japan and US agree to jointly develop deep-sea rare earth deposits. And US airlines are cutting 4% of flights at 40 major airports due to government shutdown. Welcome to the Economic Bulletin. We start off with global economies as the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, reported that global food commodity prices declined for a second consecutive month in October, driven by ample supplies, falling sugar, dairy and meat costs. The FAO Food Price Index averaged at 126.4 points, down from September's revised 128.5 and stood at 21.1% below March's 2022 peak. The drop was led by sugar prices, which fell 5.3% to their lowest since December 2020, while dairy prices slumped 3.4% and meat prices eased 2%. In a separate report, the FAO projected 2025 world cereal production at a record 2.99 billion metric tons, up 4.4% from 2024, with maize and rice output expected to reach an all-time high. Moving on to Europe, European Commissioner for Prosperity and Industrial Strategy, Stephanie Sejourne, has stated that the bloc must defend its car industry from Chinese competition and reconsider its 2035 zero-emission target. He urged export diversification, less bureaucracy, and measures to protect European production, warning that output could fall from 13 million to 9 million vehicles within a decade. He added that Europe should show flexibility on the 2035 engine ban, consider actions against Chinese plants, and reduce reliance on China for rare earths by sourcing from Brazil, Canada, and Africa, boosting recycling and investing in local extractions. The status has revealed that Germany's exports rose more than expected in September, driven by a rebound in shipments on the United States after 5 consecutive monthly declines. Data showed that seasonally and calendar-adjusted exports increased by 1.4% from August 2025, while imports climbed 3.1% compared with September 2024, where exports are up 2% and imports 4.8%. Additionally, Germany exported goods worth 131.1 billion euros and imported 115.9 billion euros in September 2025, resulting in a trade surplus of 15.3 billion euros. British companies' employment expectations declined last month for the first time in nearly 5 years, while inflation expectations reached their highest level since late 2023. Bank of England data showed that expected employment growth fell to negative 0.1% in the 3 months to October, from 0% in September, the first negative reading since November 2020. Wage growth expectations rose to 3.7%, a 5-month high, while firms' own price forecasts were unchanged. Companies now expect consumer price inflation of 3% over the next year, the highest since December 2023. Still in Europe, mortgage lender Halifax has reported that British house prices increased 0.6% in October, the strongest monthly growth since January, pushing the average property price to a record £299,862, with an annual price growth accelerating to 1.9%. The surprise rebound comes despite ongoing affordability challenges and suggests market resilience ahead of the government's upcoming budget. Northern Ireland led regional growth with prices up 8%, while London saw a slight 0.3% decline. In North America, Canada's job market surprised with 66,600 new jobs in October, beating forecasts and pushing the unemployment rate down to 6.9% from 7.1%. Statistics Canada reported that the gains were entirely in part-time work, while full-time positions declined. Youth unemployment fell significantly to 14.1% and wage growth accelerated to 4%. The data strengthened the Canadian dollar and marked a strong rebound after summer job losses. And in Latin America, official data has shown that Mexico's annual inflation rate eased to 3.57% in October, remaining within the central bank's target range for the fourth consecutive month. The figure was down from 3.76% in September and aligned with analyst forecasts. Despite the positive trend, economists cautioned that inflation could rebound in early 2026 due to planned tax increases on soft drinks, new import tariffs, and a 12% minimum wage hike. The data comes a day after Mexico cut the benchmark interest rate to 7.25%, its fourth consecutive reduction, while acknowledging ongoing economic weakness and moderate growth. On tariff policy, China's customs authority has announced that Beijing will restore soybean import licenses for 3 U.S. firms and lift its ban on U.S. log imports starting November 10th, signaling a further easing of trade tensions with Washington. Licenses for CHS Louis Dreyfus Company Grains Merchandising and EGT were suspended in March amid rising frictions, while the log import halt came after a U.S. probe into lumber trade. The move follows a meeting between President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping in South Korea, which improved investor confidence and led Beijing to lift some tariffs and resume limited U.S. farm purchases. However, a 10% tariff on all U.S. imports remains in place, keeping expectations for a full trade recovery in check. Reuters reported that China is developing a new licensing system for rare earth exports that will streamline shipments but maintain some control over the strategic materials. The move follows a temporary pause in recent restrictions agreed with the United States. The annual licenses will allow larger export volumes but requires detailed customer information and likely remains restrictive of defense-related users. While the White House sees this as an effectively ending control, industry experts note it doesn't represent a full rollback of China's broader export regime. Japan and United States have agreed to jointly develop deep-sea rare earth deposits near Japan's Manishima Island, seeking to reduce their reliance on China for minerals essential to advanced technology and defense. The partnership, confirmed by the Prime Minister Sanae Takahashi, follows her meeting with President Donald Trump and addresses growing concerns from China's dominance in rare earths, which accounts for about 90% of global processing. Japan has identified significant seabed mineral deposits in its exclusive economic zone and plans to use the remote island as a processing base. To help us analyze the current situation in the Asian region, we're joined from Hong Kong by the geopolitical analyst, PhD researcher at the University of Manchester, Marvin Lee. Thank you, sir, for joining us here on Qnews. Sir, let's start off by asking you, what does China's decision to restore the US soybean import license and lift the log import ban tell us about the current situation when it comes to US-Chinese trade relations?
Assalamu alaikum. Thanks for having me. Barakallahu fiqh. From the Chinese perspective, this represents a tactical unfreeze within a control framework. So what does it mean? By restoring import license for 3 American soybean companies and lifting the bans on the US log from the 10th of November, Beijing is signaling a selective goodwill in sectors that are low sensitivity and high stability, such as agriculture and forestry. And this move stabilized market expectations without changing the overall tariff structure. And according to Reuters, China's decision followed recent high-level diplomatic engagement between Beijing and Washington. And in the author of The Art of War, Sun Tzu said, to subdue the enemy without fighting in the vacuum of skills. So which means that China is using limited concessions in non-strategic areas to cool down tensions and build leverage for more important negotiations ahead. And don't forget that all those American farmers are the President Donald Trump's core supporters. So which means that China has been leveraging the soybean restrictions or the purchase of soybean as a game card to fight against Trump's aggressive policy against the China's free trade willingness to the rest of the world.
So given what you just said there, how significant is this move for the US agricultural exporters as well as the global commodity markets?
So it brings marginal relief but remains strategically constrained. So in 2025, as of the 31st of August 2025, China import around 70 million tons of soybeans, 4% increase year on year, but 70% came from Brazil, not USA. And US export to China have sharply declined compared to pre-trade war levels. So in early 2025 this year, Brazil shipped around 48.5 million tons of soybean to China, roughly 70% of China's total import. And in September and October, records volume continue to arrive primarily from Brazil. So which means that the US farmers will benefit from new orders and improved sentiments, but regaining pre-2018 market share is unlikely soon. So let's imagine that China is holding a very powerful weapon against USA. So if you would like to kickstart another trade war again, we will attack your core supporters without any hesitations. So China right now and China in 2016 is very different. China right now, they are more confident and they are ready to deal with any situation with the US. Of course, we would like to make any peace terms with US as well.
Well, as you said there, that China is fully ready to take on the US, but also they have the 10% tariff on US imports still in place. How much real progress can we talk about here when it comes to representing an easing of trade tensions between these two major power players?
This is a very good question. Honestly, this is a tactical de-escalation, not a structural reconciliation between both sides. The 10% US tariff baseline remains here, and according to ongoing congressional and trading monitoring reports. And as long as the framework stands, American soybeans remain at a price disadvantage compared to Brazil, even Argentina, and China's flexibility remains limited. And please bear in mind that China would like to promote the so-called Chinese yen and soybeans circulation, which means to buy soybeans with Chinese yen instead of USD. So if Donald Trump would like to take a hardline approach against China, which means that to push China to promote Chinese yen to the rest of the world, especially to the BRICS countries in the long term. So China will definitely win the war by pushing them into other way.
Well, let's talk about the rare earths here. Now, China is also introducing a new rare earths export licensing system. How will this affect the global manufacturing in general? That depends mainly on this material. We're seeing the Americans trying to circumvent the Chinese through other deals across the region.
This is another good question here. So no country on this planet can bypass China's export of rare earth. So you would like to manufacture F-45, 35 jet fighters. You would like to produce AI chips from like NVIDIA. You all need rare earth. And there's only one country that has the capability to dig the rare earth and even refine it and even to process it, and that is China. Because China, there used to be a very powerful country that did not focus on environmental regulation. So that's why China has the upper hand to do all the rare earth export control or export licensing system. And President Xi Jinping has been playing a very upper position to play against the American and even the Western allies and even Japan, even though they have an alliance between among these countries. So in the short term and in the long term, they still need to rely on the Chinese, the rare earth control by the Chinese world.
So, in your opinion, that basically this is when it comes to rare earths specifically, this is a losing game for the Americans, even though now that we've seen them sign a partnership with the Japanese to develop rare earth deposits there.
Yes, that's right.
Could you tell us more about these deposits in Japan? Is it going to at least fulfill partially U.S. needs when it comes to rare earths?
Honestly, let me give you evidence or data first. So back in 2010, Japan used to rely on the Chinese rare earth so much, 90% are from China. But because of the Chinese ban on the Japan in 2010 or 2011, and Japan is successfully lower the percentage from 90% to 60%. But bear in mind the 60% is still a very big number here. So they would like to develop another kind of technology just to bypass the China's choke point about the rare earth against Japanese and the American. But I don't think they can make it because you need a very big market, a very big motivation, and even and even and policies to promote this. And bear in mind that they are all democratic countries, which means that environmental regulations, all those policies, all those opposing force will drag down their the progress to bypass Chinese rare earth.
Okay, from Hong Kong, that was the geopolitical analyst and PhD researcher from the University of Manchester, Marvin Lee. Thank you so much for your insights as usual. And now we move on to the latest developments in the United States. U.S. consumer sentiment fell sharply in early November, dropping to its lowest level in nearly 3.5 years as concerns mounted over the economic impact of the prolonged government shutdown. The University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index declined to 50.3 this month from 53.6 in October, well below economists' forecasts. The decline was widespread across all demographic groups, reflecting growing anxiety about the shutdown's consequences, including cuts for low-income households, furloughed federal workers, and travel disruptions. Consumers' near-term inflation expectations rose 4.7%, while the long-term expectations moderated slightly to 3.6%. U.S. airlines began cutting 4% of flights at 40 major airports under government-mandated triggered by the air traffic control staffing shortages during the prolonged government shutdown. The reductions will rise to 10% by mid-November if the shutdown continues. The Federal Aviation Administration imposed the cuts as controller absences reached 20 to 40% daily. Major carriers, including American, Delta, United, and Southwest, are affected with hundreds of flights cancelled. The situation highlighted the shutdown's expanding impact as 13,000 controllers work without pay. The National Retail Federation has estimated that Americans are expected to spend over $1 trillion during the upcoming holiday season for the first time ever. However, this milestone comes with signs of cautious consumerism. Sales growth is predicted to slow, rising between 3.7% and 4.2% compared to last year's 4.3% increase. This reflects the pressures of persistent inflation and economic uncertainty as shoppers. The mood is affecting hiring plans, with retailers expected to hire between 265,000 and 365,000 seasonal workers, significantly fewer than the 442,000 hired last year. For the second straight month, the U.S. government failed to publish its key employment reports due to the ongoing shutdown. Economists now worry October's data may be permanently lost as critical collection windows have passed. The shutdown has halted both business and household surveys needed to calculate job growth and unemployment. While payroll data might be recoverable, the household survey used for the unemployment rate appears irrecoverable for October. The consumer price report also remains at risk. For further analysis, we're joined from Chicago by the economic policy advisor, Tariq Al-Rifai. Thank you, sir, for joining us here on Qnews. Sir, let's start off by asking you, how serious is the impact of the Federal Aviation Administration's mandated flight cuts on major U.S. airlines that has been estimated at about 10% in November?
Well, 10% seemed like a small amount, but it's actually magnified by the air travel industry. 10% of flights is a significant number, and it has a knock-on effect on other industries as well. So the reason why they're being forced now to reduce this is obviously because the stress and strain on the employees, the air traffic controllers, to be working now on 36, going on 37 days without pay. So this is adding to the stress. And, you know, we're mentioning 4% now, making it up to 10%. If this shutdown continues even longer, we'll be forced to see even higher than 10% reductions.
So with the holiday seasons coming up, if this shutdown continues on, what does this mean for passengers that are about to fly across different states to visit family, basically?
Well, travelers are already beginning to rethink their travel plans. As you know, in the U.S., the last Thursday of November is Thanksgiving. That's a major holiday, which kicks off the holiday travel season here in the U.S. And it's going to be very disruptive. Consumers are already anticipating, or travelers are already anticipating, long lines at the airports, delays, So it's really turning people off from thinking of traveling during this time as of now.
So what kind of long-term damage could the shutdown cause to airline operations in general, as well as consumer confidence in the US aviation system? As you said, there are going to be big lines during this holiday season.
Yes, confidence is down, and it will take time to recover. However, I do believe that it will recover, but of course for the airlines it's detrimental because we're going into the peak season for them. And at this time, this is when they're seeing the disruption occur, and loss in confidence. We're already seeing consumer spending being affected by this, travel plans being affected by this. So the immediate effects will be felt this holiday season. Even if the shutdown were to end tomorrow, the effects of this will be through the holiday season as the airlines and the FAA travel controllers work through bringing services back to normal.
So could there be some sort of ripple effect due to this reduction in staff when it comes to the airlines in other industries and other sectors of the economy, like tourism, for instance, business travel, consumerism in general in the US?
Well, tourism is the obvious one. Yes, it will be affected, and it is being affected. The other ones are the not so felt industries. The services sector, restaurants, etc., where they're used to having travelers at some of these destinations, and even the business destinations as well, as business travelers are unable to or changing their travel plans. But of course, the services sector is closely connected to the tourism sector, and all of these are having knock-on effects. And of course, small businesses are being more affected than the larger businesses.
Okay, from Chicago, that was the Economic Policy Advisor, Tarek El-Rifai. Thank you so much for your insights and thank you for joining us. In the tech sector, the US chipmaker Global Foundries has announced that it will invest 1.1 billion euros to expand manufacturing capabilities at its German facility as it looks to increase production. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz hailed the project as an important investment in Europe's future amid geopolitical tensions impacting the semiconductor market.
Ein Investitionsvolumen von 1,1 Milliarden Euro in die Chipfertigung hier am Standort Dresden ist also eine wirkliche Zukunftsinvestition. Und es ist ein Signal, dass Deutschland und Europa nicht nur Schritt halten wollen mit dem technologischen Fortschritt, sondern dass wir aktiv die Entwicklung des globalen Halbleitermarktes mitgestalten wollen und dass wir das vor allem auch können. Denn wir haben es ja hier nicht nur mit einer Produktionserweiterung zu tun, sondern wir haben es zu tun mit einem echten Bekenntnis zum Industriestandort Deutschland, zum Innovationsstandort Deutschland und vor allem zur technologischen Souveränität Deutschland und Europas.
In the energy sector, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has called for a new European patriotism to defend the steel industry following a summit with domestic producers, German states and trade unions. Merz stated that US tariffs and China's subsidized steel exports, which are flooding the markets, posed major challenges for both German and European steel sectors. He pledged to fully support EU proposals aimed at protecting the bloc's steel industry and hinted at a potential Franco-German initiative to advance these measures. Japan's industry ministry has announced it will temporarily increase gasoline and diesel subsidies starting next week to ensure a smooth transition to the planned elimination of fuel taxes. The move aims to prevent consumers from delaying purchases ahead of the gasoline tax abolition on December 31st and diesel tax removal by April 1st. A subsidy for gasoline will rise from the current 10 yen per litre to 25.1 yen by December 11th, effectively offsetting the current tax before its removal. Global markets showed collective decline across all indices during Friday's session. In the United States, the S&P 500 was down 1.08%, the Nasdaq declined 1.81%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped 0.66%. In Europe, Germany's DAX decreased 0.79%, France's CAC 40 contracted 0.19%, and Britain's FTSE 100 shrank 0.55%. In Asia, Japan's Nikkei 225 plunged 1.19%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng fell 0.92%, and Shanghai's Composite in China dropped 0.25%. That brings us to the end of our economic bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. World food prices declined for a second consecutive month in October. Japan and the US agreed to jointly develop deep-sea rare earth deposits. And US airlines are cutting 4% of flights at 40 major airports due to government shutdown. This brings us to the end of the Economic Bulletin, but don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok using the handle at QNewsEGY to stay informed. Thank you for watching.